The outcast of Lyra. The crystalline spires of the Lyran imperial palace pierced the violet sky like frozen lightning, their surfaces reflecting the light of 3 moons in a hypnotic dance of color. Within these towering structures of geometric perfection, Princess Nera moved through her chambers with practiced precision, her fingers trailing along the smooth walls as she navigated her world of darkness. Born to the most powerful empire in the Andromeda arm, Nera carried a burden heavier than her crown. A genetic mutation had left her without the characteristic bioluminescent eyes of her people, rendering her blind by Lyran standards. In a society that prized physical perfection above all else, she was considered flawed, unworthy of her royal heritage. The soft hum of approaching footsteps drew her attention. "Your Highness," came the measured voice of her attendant, Kylith, "the human delegation has arrived." Nera straightened her spine, adjusting the intricate neural circuitry woven into her ceremonial robes. "Thank you, Kylith. Are they as primitive as the reports suggest?" "They appear less advanced than our kind, Your Highness, but there is something different about them, especially their lead scientist, Dr. James Harrison. He carries himself with an unusual confidence for a being from such a young species." The name stirred something in Nera's memory. She had studied Earth's scientific achievements through audio lectures, and Harrison's work in xenobiology had caught her attention. His theories about adaptive evolution and biological diversity had caused quite a stir among Lyran scholars. As she made her way to the grand reception hall, accompanied by the subtle chime of her position indicators, Nera could sense the usual mix of pity and dismissal from the court nobles. Their whispers followed her like shadows, speaking of shame and weakness, of a princess who would never truly rule. The massive doors parted with a crystalline song, and Nera entered the hall, her steps careful but deliberate. The ambient temperature dropped several degrees, a sign of many bodies gathered in the space. She took her place on the receiving dais, grateful for the subtle vibrations in her robes that helped her maintain proper posture. "Presenting the Earth delegation," announced the herald, his voice resonating through the chamber. "Led by Dr. James Harrison, chief xenobiologist of the United Earth Alliance." Footsteps approached, different from the precise rhythm of Lyran movement. These were more varied, more natural. They stopped at the prescribed distance, and a voice spoke, warm and clear. "Princess Nera, I bring greetings from Earth. Your empire's achievements in biotechnology are legendary among our people." Something in his tone made Nera pause. There was no trace of the usual condescension or carefully masked revulsion she had grown accustomed to. Instead, she heard genuine interest and was that admiration. "Welcome to Lyra Prime, Dr. Harrison," she responded, inclining her head slightly. "I trust your journey through the quantum corridors was comfortable." "Fascinating would be a better word, Your Highness. Your people's mastery of space-time manipulation is remarkable, though I must say, I'm particularly interested in your personal achievements in neural interface technology." A murmur of shock rippled through the court. No one ever acknowledged Nera's work, her attempts to compensate for her blindness through technological innovation. It simply wasn't discussed in polite company. "You're well-informed, Doctor," she said, allowing a small smile to cross her features. "Perhaps you'd be interested in discussing some of Earth's recent advances in adaptive technology. I've found your papers on bioelectric field manipulation quite illuminating." The tension in the room was palpable. A princess of Lyra engaging in scientific discourse with a human, unprecedented, unseemly. Yet as James Harrison began to speak, his enthusiasm matching her own, Nera felt something she hadn't experienced in years: hope. Little did either of them know that this conversation would set in motion events that would shake the very foundations of both their worlds, challenging age-old prejudices and redefining the meaning of strength, vision, and leadership in ways neither human nor Lyran had ever imagined. In the shadows of the Great Hall, High Commander Varix watched with narrowed eyes, his bioluminescent gaze flickering with concern. This human's arrival complicated things. Plans would need to be adjusted. The succession could not be left to chance or to a blind princess who dared to find strength in her weakness. Breaking through the darkness, The weeks following the Earth delegation's arrival brought unprecedented changes to the Lyran Imperial Palace. In her private laboratory, Princess Nera sat motionless as Dr. James Harrison calibrated a delicate array of sensors around her head. The device, a fusion of Earth's neural interface technology and Lyran crystalline computing, hummed softly. "Ready for the initial test?" James asked, his fingers dancing across the holographic control panel. "Remember, this is just a prototype. We'll need to make adjustments as we go." Nera nodded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I'm ready." She had endured countless failed experiments before, each promising to compensate for her lack of bioluminescent sight. None had succeeded. James activated the device. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Nera gasped. The darkness that had been her constant companion since birth began to change. She couldn't see in the traditional sense, but she could perceive energy patterns, complex webs of bioelectric fields emanating from every living being in the room. "James," she whispered, "I can sense you, your energy signature. It's different from the Lyran's, more dynamic, less structured." She turned her head, tracking his movement as he circled her chair. "How is this possible?" "We combined Earth's brainwave interpretation technology with your people's energy manipulation capabilities," he explained, his voice excited. "Instead of trying to replicate Lyran vision, we created something new, a way to perceive the energy that flows through all living things." The implications were staggering. Not only could Nera navigate her environment, but she could also potentially read the subtle energy fluctuations that accompanied emotions and intentions, something even normal Lyran vision couldn't achieve. As news of the breakthrough spread through the palace, reactions were mixed. Some celebrated the innovative fusion of human and Lyran technology. Others, led by High Commander Varix, saw it as an affront to their species' purity. "This is an abomination," Varix declared during an emergency session of the Imperial Council. "Our princess parades around with human machinery grafted to her nervous system. It's degrading to our royal bloodline." But Nera was beyond caring about such criticism. For the first time in her life, she could move through her world with confidence. James had helped her discover that her supposed weakness might actually be a unique strength. During their daily training sessions, Nera learned to interpret the subtle variations in energy signatures. She could detect the flutter of anxiety in a courtier's field, the sharp spikes of anger in a heated debate, and most importantly, the smooth, steady flow of truthfulness versus the chaotic patterns of deception. "Your ability to read energy patterns is developing faster than we anticipated," James noted one evening as they worked in the laboratory. "You're seeing things even our sensors can't detect." Nera smiled, watching the fascinating swirls of bioluminescence that accompanied his words. "Perhaps this is why I was born different, not as a curse, but as an opportunity to evolve beyond our traditional limitations." Their success drew attention from unexpected quarters. Progressive members of the Lyran nobility began to approach Nera, seeking her insights. Young Lyrans born with various genetic variations, long hidden away by ashamed families, found hope in her example. But with growing influence came growing danger. High Commander Varix wasn't merely concerned about tradition. He was terrified of the political implications. A princess who could detect deception through energy patterns posed a direct threat to his carefully laid plans. Late one night, as Nera practiced extending her energy perception range, she detected an unusual pattern in the palace's security grid. Subtle fluctuations suggested someone was tampering with the systems, creating gaps in the surveillance network. "James," she called out, knowing he was working late in his adjacent laboratory, "I need your expertise with something." As they investigated together, a disturbing pattern emerged. Someone was systematically creating blind spots in the palace's security, particularly around the secure areas containing classified research data and diplomatic communications. "These energy signatures," Nera murmured, tracing the patterns with her mind. "They're familiar. I've sensed them before in the council chambers when certain members thought no one was watching them." James pulled up the security logs on his tablet. According to these records, everything's normal. Someone's covering their tracks well. But they can't hide their energy signatures, Nera replied, a grim smile forming on her face. Not from me, not anymore. As they dug deeper into the mystery, neither of them noticed the shadow that slipped away from the laboratory's entrance. In his private chambers, High Commander Varix received the report from his spy with growing concern. The blind princess was becoming far too perceptive. The timeline would need to be accelerated. "Prepare the others," he commanded. "We move against her at the upcoming Celestial Festival. The human has made her stronger, but every strength can become a weakness if you know how to exploit it." But Varix had underestimated the depth of the connection between Nera and James. In helping her discover her unique abilities, James had also taught her something the Lyran nobility had forgotten in their pursuit of perfection. True strength comes not from conformity, but from embracing what makes you different. Shadows of betrayal. The Celestial Festival loomed 3 days away, and the Imperial Palace hummed with frenetic energy that made Nera's enhanced senses tingle. Through her neural interface, she perceived the usual elaborate preparations, but beneath the surface excitement lurked darker currents, patterns of energy that spoke of secrecy and threat. In the secure laboratory she now shared with James, Nera traced the complex web of energy signatures they had mapped throughout the palace. "The disruptions are increasing," she said, her fingers hovering over a holographic display. "Someone's been accessing restricted areas in a pattern. Look, weapons storage, communication hubs, shield generator controls." James studied the data streams, his energy signature pulsing with concern. "They're methodically testing our security, but why show their hand now? Unless," he straightened suddenly, "unless they want us to detect these breaches." A distraction, Nera realized. These energy signatures are too obvious, too easily tracked. High Commander Varix is more subtle than this. She had learned to recognize her cousin's particular energy pattern, sharp, controlled, with undertones of cold ambition. Their investigation had revealed disturbing connections. Varix had been secretly meeting with conservative faction leaders, making promises of a return to pure Lyran values. But more worrying were his connections off-world, encrypted communications with known arms dealers and mercenary groups. A soft chime announced the arrival of Kylith, Nera's attendant. "Your Highness, urgent news. The diplomatic corps intercepted a transmission. 3 mercenary vessels passed through the quantum corridor an hour ago, their signatures masked." James activated his secure tablet. "I've got contacts in Earth's intelligence service. Let me see if they can track those ships." He paused, reading an incoming message. "Well, that's interesting. The ship's energy signatures match a group that raided an Earth weapons facility last month. They stole prototype neural disruptors, devices designed to interfere with brain-computer interfaces." Nera felt a chill run through her. Neural disruptors would render her interface useless, leaving her truly blind and vulnerable. "The festival," she said. "That's when they'll strike. Thousands of guests, multiple potential targets, maximum chaos." But as they worked to uncover the plot, they had an unexpected ally. Lieutenant Myra, a young officer in the Imperial Guard, approached them with crucial information. She had served under Varix and witnessed his growing obsession with purifying the royal line. "He plans to do more than just remove you from power," Myra reported, her energy signature tight with anxiety. "The neural disruptors are just the first phase. He's modified them to not only disable your interface, but to permanently damage your neural pathways. He wants to make an example of you." The revelation sparked something in Nera, not fear, but a fierce determination. She had spent her life adapting, finding strength in her differences. She wouldn't let Varix turn that strength into a weakness. Working through the night, James and Nera modified her neural interface. "We can't prevent the disruptors from affecting you," James explained, "but we can change how your brain processes the interference. Instead of shutting down your perception, it might actually enhance it, temporarily at least." "Might?" Nera asked, sensing his uncertainty. "It's risky," he admitted. "The energy surge could overwhelm your neural pathways, but it's better than being defenseless." As they prepared their countermeasures, Nera made a surprising discovery. Her enhanced perception had revealed something about the Lyran physiology that generations of scientists had missed. The bioluminescent properties of her people weren't just for vision. They were part of a complex energy manipulation system that had gone dormant through centuries of focusing solely on visual capabilities. Our ancestors, she explained to James, they didn't just see energy, they could manipulate it. We lost that ability when we became obsessed with physical perfection. But my interface, it's somehow reactivating those dormant pathways. The implications were staggering. If she could learn to control this ability in time, she might be able to turn Varix's own weapon against him. But mastering an ability that her people had lost centuries ago wouldn't be easy. Time was running out. The day before the festival, they received word that Varix had called an emergency session of the Imperial Council. His energy signature, when Nera scanned it from afar, pulsed with triumphant malice. "He's making his move early," James said, quickly gathering their evidence. "We need to expose him before he can implement his full plan." But as they rushed to the council chambers, Nera sensed a familiar energy pattern shifting through the palace's secret passages. Varix wasn't heading to the council chamber. It was another feint. "James, wait," she called out, concentrating on the energy flows around them. "He's leading us into a trap, the real threat." She turned her head toward the palace's power core, where a new energy signature had just appeared. The real threat is already in position. The game was about to change, and Nera knew that the next few hours would determine not just her fate, but the future of her entire civilization. The question was, could she master her newfound abilities in time to save everything she held dear? Rising storm. The palace power core thrummed with dangerous energy as Nera and James raced through the crystalline corridors. Her enhanced senses detected multiple hostile signatures converging on their location, Varix's mercenaries, their neural patterns alien and aggressive. "The power core's energy signature is destabilizing," Nera said, her modified interface translating the complex patterns into comprehensible data. "They're not just trying to disable my interface, they're planning to overload the entire palace's neural network." James's tablet flashed with urgent readings. "If they succeed, it won't just affect you. Every piece of neural-linked technology in the palace will be fried. The security systems, life support, even the structural integrity fields." "Leaving the palace defenseless during the festival," Nera finished. "The perfect cover for a coup." They reached the power core's main access chamber just as Lieutenant Myra's voice crackled over their secure channel. "Your Highness, Varix is addressing the council now. He's accusing you of mental instability, claiming your neural interface has corrupted your mind. He's calling for an emergency transfer of power." Nera sensed movement ahead, 3 mercenaries, their weapons armed with neural disruptor modifications. Without hesitation, she reached out with her newly awakened abilities, feeling the ancient energy manipulation powers of her ancestors stirring within her. The first mercenary fired, but Nera was already moving. She didn't dodge so much as flow around the neural pulse, her consciousness extending into the energy field around her. James provided covering fire with his Earth-modified stun weapon, forcing the attackers to split their attention. "The power core," James called out. "They've already started the overload sequence." Nera pressed her hands against the core's crystalline surface, letting her consciousness merge with its pulsing energy field. The sensation was overwhelming, like trying to control a river with her bare hands. But somewhere in that flood of power, she sensed patterns similar to the bioluminescent energy that flowed through all Lyrans. "Cover me," she told James. "I need to try something." As James and the newly arrived Lieutenant Myra held off the mercenaries, Nera delved deeper into the power core's energy matrix. Her ancestors hadn't just used their bioluminescence for vision. They had been energy shapers, capable of manipulating the very forces that powered their civilization. The overload sequence fought against her control, its chaotic patterns threatening to overwhelm her neural interface. Pain lanced through her head as the interface struggled to process the massive energy flows. But beneath the pain, she felt something else, a resonance between her own bioluminescent energy and the core's power. In the council chambers above, Varix was reaching the climax of his prepared speech. And so, for the safety of our empire, I move that Princess Nera be removed from the line of succession, effective immediately. The chamber's neural network exploded with light. Through every crystal panel, every display screen, every neural interface in the palace, Nera broadcast what she was seeing. Not visual images, but pure energy patterns, the truth laid bare in waves of bioluminescent power. The council members saw Varix's secret meetings, his deals with mercenaries, the planned coup in all its details. But more than that, they saw their world as Nera saw it. The beautiful complexity of energy flowing through all things, the interconnected patterns that bound their civilization together. They saw strength in difference, power in adaptation, and the profound potential that lay dormant in their own beings. Varix's energy signature flared with rage and fear. This is a trick. The human technology has given her the power to manipulate our minds. No, Nera's voice resonated through the neural network. It has helped me rediscover what we once were, what we could be again. In the power core chamber, Nera's consciousness expanded further. She could sense every energy flow in the palace now, from the mighty throb of the core to the delicate neural patterns of individual thoughts. The overload sequence was still running, fighting against her control, but now she understood what she had to do. James, she called out, her voice strained with effort. The interface set it to full capacity. That could kill you, he protested, even as he moved to comply. Trust me, she said. I understand now. Our ancestors. They didn't need interfaces. The technology isn't the source of the power, it's just awakening what was always there. As James adjusted the interface settings, Nera felt the last artificial barriers fall away. The power core's energy surged through her, no longer fighting her control but flowing with it, responding to the ancient Lyran ability that had lain dormant in her genes. The overload sequence reversed, the chaotic energy patterns smoothing out under her guidance. Throughout the palace, neural systems stabilized, but now they hummed with a new resonance, the awakened energy of a civilization remembering what it had forgotten. In the council chamber, Varix made his final desperate move. He drew a hidden neural disruptor, aiming it at the nearest council member. This isn't over, he snarled. Our people will never accept. The weapon crumbled in his hands, its energy matrix dissolving under Nera's newfound control. The palace guard moved in, their own neural interfaces now attuned to the truth that couldn't be hidden. But even as victory seemed assured, Nera sensed a new danger. The power core's energy patterns were shifting again, but this time it wasn't Varix's doing. Something more fundamental was changing in the very fabric of Lyran technology, and not even her enhanced abilities could predict what would happen next. A new dawn. The Imperial Palace's power systems pulsed with unprecedented energy patterns, rippling through the neural network like waves in a cosmic ocean. Nera stood at the heart of it all, her consciousness expanded beyond normal perception, sensing the massive technological awakening that threatened to overwhelm centuries of Lyran advancement. The entire system is evolving, she told James, her voice tight with concentration. Our technology isn't just responding to the ancient abilities, it's adapting to them, trying to merge with them, if we can't stabilize it. The whole network could collapse, James finished, his fingers flying over multiple holographic displays, and take the palace's life support systems with it. In the council chambers above, chaos reigned. With Varix under arrest, his supporters were fleeing, but the real crisis was just beginning. The neural interfaces used by every Lyran in the palace were activating dormant genetic capabilities, unleashing powers that had been buried beneath millennia of focused evolution. Lieutenant Myra burst into the power core chamber. Your Highness, we have reports of similar effects spreading through the city. The quantum communication network is amplifying the awakening. Nera felt the truth of it in the energy patterns surrounding them. What had started as her personal journey of adaptation was becoming a species-wide transformation. The very technology that had helped her overcome her supposed disability was now forcing her entire civilization to confront its forgotten potential. "We need to contain it," James said. "Find a way to slow down the awakening before it overwhelms people who aren't ready for it." But Nera, deep in her enhanced perception, saw a different solution. "No," she said, her voice resonating with newfound authority. "We don't need to contain it, we need to guide it. Our ancestors understood that true strength comes from harmony between biological and technological evolution. We lost that wisdom in our pursuit of perfection." Through her connection to the palace's systems, Nera began to weave a new pattern. She took the chaotic energy of awakening abilities and shaped it, creating channels for it to flow naturally rather than explosively. The process was demanding, requiring all her newly developed skills and James's technical expertise to implement. "What you're attempting," James said, monitoring her vital signs with concern, "it's not just stabilizing the system. You're rewriting the fundamental relationship between Lyran biology and technology." "The relationship was always there," Nera replied, her consciousness expanding further. "We just forgot how to listen to it. My blindness. It forced me to find another way to see. Now I can help my people find another way to be." Throughout the palace and beyond, the transformation continued, but now under guidance. Those with dormant abilities found them awakening gently, naturally, supported by the very technology that had once suppressed them. The neural network became a teaching tool, helping each Lyran understand and control their rediscovered capabilities. In the council chamber, the eldest council member, Archon Zenith, watched in amazement as patterns of pure energy danced through the air, visible now to all Lyrans as their bioluminescent perception expanded beyond mere sight. "This," he announced to the assembled dignitaries, "is what the ancient texts spoke of. The time when technology and biology would reunite, when the artificial divisions between ability and disability would fade in the light of true understanding." Hours passed as Nera and James worked to stabilize the Great Awakening. Earth observers reported similar effects reaching Lyran communities across the galaxy, carried by the quantum communication network. But rather than causing panic, the controlled awakening was being embraced as a renaissance. Finally, as the third moon rose over the crystal spires of the palace, Nera felt the energy patterns settle into a new harmony. She withdrew her consciousness from the network, exhausted but triumphant. "How do you feel?" James asked, supporting her as she swayed slightly. "Different," she said, then smiled. "But then I've always been different. Now I understand why." She turned to face the assembled council members who had gathered in the power core chamber. "My whole life, I was seen as flawed because I couldn't see like other Lyrans, but that difference forced me to evolve, to find strength in adaptation rather than conformity." Archon Zenith stepped forward. "And in doing so, you have shown us the path forward. The human scientist helped you find your strength, and together you have helped our entire civilization rediscover its potential." The implications were staggering. The Lyran Empire, long isolated by its obsession with genetic purity, was transforming into something new. A civilization that valued diversity, adaptation, and the harmony between natural ability and technological advancement. In the days that followed, as the Great Awakening stabilized across Lyran space, changes rippled through their society. The rigid hierarchy based on physical perfection began to dissolve, replaced by a new understanding of strength and ability. Earth-Lyran relations deepened as more humans came to help with the transition, bringing their own perspectives on adaptation and diversity. Nera, standing in her private gardens with James, watched the energy patterns of her transforming world through senses that were neither purely biological nor technological, but a perfect fusion of both. "What do you see now?" James asked, his own neural interface allowing him a glimpse of the energy flows that had become her natural way of perceiving the world. "I see possibility," she replied. "In our differences, in our adaptations, in our willingness to evolve. My blindness wasn't a curse. It was the first step toward a new way of seeing. Sometimes, what we think of as our greatest weakness can become our greatest strength." Above them, the three moons of Lyra Prime cast their light over a civilization reborn. their crystalline cities now pulsing with the visible energy of a people who had remembered how to see with more than just their eyes. The story of the blind princess who helped her people find a new way of seeing had only just begun.